Hi, in this demonstration I'm going to show you how I stretch canvases starting at the corners first. This is a technique recommended by conservators to reduce the radial cracking that is found on canvases. This is the opposite method than I learned in school, but when I worked at a canvas maker and woodshop and when I worked as a preparator in a museum, I learned that starting in the corners is the way to go. So what you're going to need to begin is your stretcher pliers. I use wire cutters, an awl, a tape measure, some scissors or utility knife, your staple gun. I happen to have a pneumatic staple gun, so it's plugged into an air source, and the PSI is set at 80. This is Fastco. You can use a traditional handheld staple gun or even an electric one if you like. I have nitrile gloves here. This is to keep the canvas relatively clean. And I have a square. This will check the dimensions of the canvas I'm going to cut. And lastly, I have some aluminum stretcher bars here. Now these are very beautiful, expensive stretcher bars that expand using an expansion bolt system here, so you don't need to use such fancy bars. On the back, there's a wood bead that we are going to staple into. So the first thing to do when you begin is decide if you want the canvas horizontally oriented or vertically oriented, and this will affect the way that I fold the hospital corners. I'm going to decide on the vertical orientation. And so what I need to do is I want to make sure that I have not only the dimensions of the canvas, length and height, but also depth, and also however much wraparound I want. So I want to at least cover this area here. So I have to add this dimension plus the depth to the overall dimensions. And because it's added to each side, I essentially have to double that distance and add it to the length, and double that distance and add it to the height. I worked it out to be about 7 inches or 7 1/4. So I'm going to add 7 1/4 inches or 7.5 inches to both length and width in the preparation of my canvas. So I'll show you how I do that. Clear this off. So at this point, I won't need my pliers or my staple gun. I will need a pencil, a tape measure, and the square, and the scissors. I save lots of fragments of linen just for this purpose. Sometimes the end of the roll is perfect for a smaller size canvas. Kind of like when you're wrapping a present, it also might make sense to put the stretcher bar on the linen itself. Okay, so measuring the stretcher bar, I think it's 17.5 by 15. So that means I need to add 7 to both, 7 1/4 or 7.5 to both sides. Just going to do 3 3/4. And 3/4. 3 3/4 is about down here. So I'm going to move this down. Okay. So I'm going to cut the linen first so that I can more usable piece here. You want to make sure that your linen is square. Sure. This is a little more usable here, so try this again. Okay. So I've cut myself much more than I think I need, and I'm actually going to be painting on the opposite side. This canvas is primed, but I like to do it in a kind of a particular way where I paint on the back and size the back of it. So let me mark this first. 3.5. That's good. I'll make a little tally mark here. 3.5. Helps make sure that the canvas is actually square too. Let's check that first. When you're squaring your canvas, all you have to do is measure the diagonals and compare them. They should be equal. This is 23 inches. This is 23 inches, so it's square. Okay, 3.5 out from here is here. I need a little more than 3.5, so 3 3/3. It's been a long time actually, so I'm a little bit rusty. 3 3/4. And 3/4. Cool. Should be able to connect these lines and trim across. Good to double check your measurements, I guess, before you start marking up the linen, especially because I'm working on the back. So just want to make sure that I've got this 3 3/4 here. I'm going to put a little bit of a tally mark here. Three 3/4 here. 3 3/4. And slide down a little bit. Okay. I always try to save the biggest piece of linen that I can. Okay, just gonna flip this around and double check this. So that's plenty. So again, I'm using the back side of the intended side of the linen. And this is just another layer of protection. And also, it's easier to stretch when it's primed, because when it's loose, the threads are gonna waver. Okay, so I wanna make sure I have equal amounts. I'm gonna scoot this down a little bit here. That's plenty. Okay, so the first step is deciding which orientation. We've got that. And then what I'm gonna be doing is, I'm gonna be using the corners to set the tension all the way around. So what I do first is I fold one side over. I'm pulling it against the side, and I'm gonna fold it a little bit and leave a half staple. So I'm leaning the staple gun at an angle so that one end of the staple holds it down. I'm using that to pull against. So I'm gonna go across to the other corner, and I'm going to pull against this. Now these pliers have essentially a sheet metal crimping pliers, but there's a welded fulcrum at the bottom. This fulcrum is going to sit flush against the edge of the interior of the frame. I'm going to use it to pull against. So I want to get a broad grip. I'm pulling this way against this corner here. I'm going to put 3 normal staples. I space them about 3/4 to an inch apart. Once that's set, I can remove this temporary staple and grip this side and do the same. So I use the pliers and I discarded the staple. Make sure you don't leave the staple on the tabletop because it will scratch up your linen. So 3 staples here. Okay, the next step is to temporarily fasten these corners. So what I do is I pull this triangle here. I pull this triangle here towards the bar. And then what I do is, once it's flush against the edge, I pinch this corner shut and fold it over. Next, I put my finger in here and pull this up until it lines up with the vertical edge. Okay, I'll need to do both sides because this is very stubborn linen. If your linen is too stiff, you can always use like a nice hot lamp over it that will loosen it up. If you're working in the sunshine, the heat from the sun will warm it up to the point where it's usable. Okay, so the folds should be completely aligned in the back, like this. Now I don't need to use pliers at this point because I'm just gonna hold it in place. Okay, we're going to use these corners to pull against on the opposite side. So I flip this around and I start in the middle. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to pull this direction and work the tension towards the corners. To pull out any looseness, I'm going to pull it out and fasten it temporarily here. So I'm using the fulcrum. Barely enough. Okay. You can see it coming up against this edge. So I've got 1/2 staple here. Return to the middle and pull it out to the other side. Whatever you do on one side, you should match it across the stretcher bars. Okay. So another 1/2 staple here. Doing the corners is the hardest part of this process, especially if you're working on a stubborn surface. Okay, so now I'm going to work the tension from here out to this corner. And I'm going to fix it down. So kind of walking the canvas out this way. And because these stretcher bars expand, it's really not so critical that I get it super tight. Okay, now I've got this in place. I'm going to put 3 permanent staples. And I'm going to repeat on the other side. Okay, 3 staples. I'm not sure if you can see this, but right here. You always want the staples to be within the area that you're gripping, so don't go beyond the grip of the pliers. Okay, now I've got these corners nearly finished. All I need to do is replace this half fold with a more permanent fold. So this comes out, and you first repeat the same process on the other side. And then do a permanent staple. Okay, folding it tight. When you get to the corners, you're going to have to hold much more fabric because of the folds. So just take into account, you should grip the whole corner. Okay, repeat the process. Try and get a good grip so you shouldn't be bending all the way down. Just get a good grip so it's nearly vertical. Should be able to hold it in place. Okay. The final step on doing the corners is repeating the process here. So I start at the center and work my way to the corners here, and then fasten these down permanently. And then the only remaining step is to fill in the blanks in a way that is distributed evenly. Okay, so I'm gonna have to remove these because of how tight this linen is. There we go. I often will hold it with my fingers too if I have to readjust my grip. So it's like an alternating walk, holding it with the pliers, and then positioning it with my fingers, positioning my pliers. Okay, 3 here. Okay, the final step in this process is filling in the blanks so that each of these are complete. And I'm still working from the corners. We don't need these anymore unless something goes wrong, so we'll put these aside. Sometimes canvas can be really stubborn. So I'm looking at the weave of the linen specifically to see that it's straight. Okay, now that I've done 3 on this side, I'm going to jump over to this side. Okay, I like to complete one side before going to the next. So since we're working on this long brace, we're going to complete this. But ultimately, you want to work all around the square, alternating sides. Whatever you do to one side, you should go across the canvas and do to the other. I'm just going to finish this off because I can't. The larger canvases are going to take a long time to fill in the blanks. Okay. Great. I think I did one less staple. That's okay. So the next step is to finish off the short braces here. Here, I'm just going to walk myself towards the middle. I'm gonna walk myself towards the middle. This is usually the final step on the longer canvases. Take a long, so. Okay, now I have a stretch canvas. You can check the sides, make sure that the tension's good. It's not as tight as it's going to be. I'm gonna be sizing this, but you can check the weave itself to see if it's pretty clear, pretty square with the edges. Looks good to me. So the next step that I'm gonna do, which I always do this, is I'll just like clean up the folds themselves. So I fold this under, and I'll tack these to the sides as well. Having this extra linen there is really helpful, just in case you ever need to restretch your canvas. So always give yourself enough canvas to work on. Okay, now this, I'm gonna fold these over as well, but the trouble is there's so much tension here, I'm gonna have to cut this so that it is, so I can fold over, otherwise it will just wrinkle. So I'm gonna put a little slice right here. It's not much, it just helps me fold this over. So again, this is kind of a cosmetic step. It's not necessary, but it does look really nice, and it keeps the back really neat. One thing that I'll do at the end is I'll install D-rings so that it's easy to hang. I'll do that in another demonstration. You can look that up yourself. But essentially what I'll do is I'll make pilot holes using the awl. I usually space the ring down 4 inches, and I'll put pilot holes and screw it into the wood. Okay, so fold this down, and then I want to hold this in place. So I usually put the corners first. I only need to do this where on the short braces that's overlapping. Okay. Oops. So when a staple hits another staple, you'll have to remove it. So what I usually do is I use the flat side down, and I'll just twist. Yeah, so staples will bounce off themselves. Okay, you can also do this as much as you like. I'll usually do it every few staples, and then the final step here will be tightening out the canvas, especially if you have keyable or stretcher bars. But because I'm going to be sizing this, that will do a lot of the tightening for me, so I won't be tightening it. There you go. A beautiful stretcher bar, evenly stretched, nice neat corners. Thanks for watching. Well, might as well tighten it to show you. I've got an Allen wrench here. Whatever you do to one side, you should do across. This is really cool too because you can paint on the back of it if you want to leave like a personalized message. Collectors and conservators love having painted signatures, so I wouldn't use a Sharpie unless you absolutely have to. Sharpies tend to migrate through the paint surfaces. You can see them on the front of the canvas. They're really should not be using them. So I'm just tightening this a little bit to show you. It should sound like a drum. So this is ready to go. I'm going to be sizing this, and I'll mask off the edges, and I'll prime the front, and we'll be ready for painting. Thanks.